Welcome back. Well, with oil and gas prices reaching unprecedented levels, energy exporting countries seem to enjoy a more powerful position on the world political scene. Oil wealth in Venezuela has underpinned President Hugo Chávez's efforts to reshape Venezuela, allowing him to fund extensive social programs and reject U.S. criticism of his policies. Russian gas exports have enabled President Putin to exert control over the energy sector in neighboring former Soviet countries and consequently their political direction. In Iran, European and Japanese companies have continued to do business with the Islamic Republic despite the U.S. imposed embargo, leaving American companies out of lucrative Iranian markets and minimizing the effects of Western attempts to force Iran to abide by the Security Council resolution on its nuclear activities. Well, what about Arab oil exporting countries? Where do they fit in on the world political scene, and why haven't they used the current energy situation as maybe a bargaining chip in dealing with the Middle East crisis? Joining us again to answer all these questions are our guests in London, Dr. Mamdouh Salameh, an international oil expert and energy consultant for the World Bank. In Washington, D.C., Tyson Slocum, he's the director of the Public Citizens Energy Program. And here in Doha, Dr. Ibrahim Owais, an international economic advisor and professor of economics at Georgetown University. Dr. Owais, if I could start off with you in the second half. In 1973, the Arab members of OPEC used the oil card to immense effect with the oil embargo. Why haven't we seen anything similar since, particularly at this stage in the Middle East?
Simply because there were no foreign troops, American troops, in the region at that time. Now the region has been dominated by the influx of armies from many countries, particularly United States and England. They are there in Iraq, and they have bases in other spots of the Arab countries. Furthermore, the Arab leaders do not want to face another challenge with the United States. They are too weak to implement a policy compatible with their political interests in the future. They acquiesce to what Washington is now doing. So in this regard, in this atmosphere, I don't see any role that the Arab countries can seize and play at this crucial time when the price of oil has increased substantially. That should have been a golden opportunity for a number of Arab countries to dictate or at least to implement certain policies. I wanted to add one particular point. I disagree with the point that that the tension had been mounting in the region for many years, and this should not be the factor. In fact, this is the factor, and I would also add that the new tension there is of a magnitude completely different from what it used to be in the past. By bombing or by having a war against Iran and the retaliation of that against all of the oil installations in the region, that will definitely be a completely new scenario that the world had never witnessed before.
Interesting that you brought that up. In London, Mamdouh Salameh, reading some of your works, you've said before that the world's first oil war was the Iraq War, and that there'll be more oil wars in the future. How do you qualify that?
The war in Iraq was about oil. And wherever there is oil, there is conflict. The Middle East has seen conflict since the discovery of oil in its area. And with that in mind, you will see more wars as the proven reserves of the world start to dwindle. They are dwindling now. And with that in mind, there will be competition for these dwindling reserves, possibly conflict and wars. We have seen the war in Iraq as the first oil war in the 21st century. there is a potential for war even between China and the United States, both of them being heavily dependent on Middle East oil. And you will see also possibly challenges between or conflicts between Japan and China as well. So wherever there is oil, there is conflict. However, I must point out one thing. The first and second oil crises in 1973 and 79 respectively were a disruption of supplies. The next oil crisis will not be affected by disruption of supplies. It will be induced by growing demand, particularly from the Asia-Pacific region.
Tyson Slocum in D.C., are you encouraged by the discovery of the Tupi Sul oil field in Brazil? This is set to contain 8 billion barrels of oil and gas. And is there a new oil frontier away from the Middle East in places like South America and Central Asia?
I mean, sure, that is helpful anytime you have new supplies in an era of exploding demand. But the fact is that the United States has been shifting away from heavy reliance on the Middle East for quite some time. Canada and Mexico and some Western European sources represent the vast majority of our oil imports in the United States. So these new discoveries, I don't think are going to, in the end, do anything to really address the problems of huge demand. The fact is that if the United States wants to effectively address this issue, we have to start using energy more wisely. China understood that. They implemented stronger fuel economy standards for new cars that exceed those in the United States. We have to start investing more money into alternatives, and an effort by the new Democratic Congress to repeal billions of dollars in oil company tax breaks and invest that money in demand reduction and other energy efficiency programs has drawn a threatened veto from President Bush. So the current Bush administration is not taking a pragmatic view on this. They are unlikely to try to change their hardline stance against big exporters.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you. Talking about the global
Yes.
ramifications, do you think that there is an international will to try out energy alternatives?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen Europe take the lead on that. And so as prices continue to remain at sustained high levels, yes, I do think you're going to see efforts to move towards alternatives. But it's going to take some time. Moving our transportation system away from oil is not going to be easy. It's going to take some time. Other countries, particularly in Europe, are taking the lead, and the United States is falling further behind, unfortunately.
In Doha, Dr. Ibrahim Owais, just broadening this out, the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook report for 2006 predicted some dire things for the world. I quoted, it said the world could be dependent on dirty, insecure and expensive energy by 2030. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this is a good analysis and good projection in the oil markets. But I would like to add here in this regard that the future will definitely dictate the development of alternate sources of energy at a much faster rate than ever before, because of the driven by the rise in the price of oil, because this is the only way to do it. President Nixon's Project Independence of 1973 never took off ground. The reason for this is that still the price of oil is cheap in comparison to other alternate sources of energy. So the solar energy and other types of energy, and the wind that you see you see it in southern France and a number of other countries as well, the development of those will only depend on the price of the rise in the price of oil, and it is happening now, and hence we will see the development of alternate sources of energy and the technology associated with it. That we
All right,
will see
I'm sorry,
that in
Dr. Owais, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we have run out of time on the program. Dr. Ibrahim Owais in Doha, Mamdouh Salami in London, and Tyson Slocum in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts with us. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. Bye-bye for now.